After a wave of cancellations across the country, the Alberta government has greenlit a major worship event featuring American Christian rock musician Sean Feucht on the Legislative Assembly of Alberta's grounds in Edmonton.
Pro-Palestine activists plan to disrupt Toronto's subway Tuesday evening, demanding an immediate arms embargo on Ottawa's shipments to Israel.
BC Conservative leader John Rustad wants the NDP government to appeal a BC Supreme Court decision granting Aboriginal title in Richmond, citing private property risks. Hello Canada, it's Wednesday, August 13th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Cosmin, Dzsurdzsa.
And I'm Geoff Knight.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. The Alberta government has greenlit a major worship event featuring American Christian rock musician Sean Feucht on the Legislative Assembly of Alberta's grounds in Edmonton. This decision goes against the pattern of cancellations and anti-Christian censorship witnessed in other parts of Canada. The Revive in 25 Let Us Worship gathering is set to rock the Alberta Legislature grounds on August 22nd. According to a spokesperson from the Alberta Ministry of Infrastructure, this decision is all about upholding the basic rights of Canadians. The spokesperson said in an emailed statement, quote, "Alberta is committed to supporting and respecting everyone's right to free speech. We have a duty to uphold these rights and freedoms regardless of an individual's religious or political beliefs. The Government of Alberta does not engage in shutting down or censoring law-abiding events." The spokesperson went on to explain that the legislature grounds hosts all sorts of events and are intended for lawful public use. According to the ministry, booking is straightforward, and anybody intending to follow the rules is allowed to host a peaceful event. Feucht's event sailed through the approval process, aligning perfectly with the province's guidelines for public use of the space. The spokesperson said, quote, "Events held on the Alberta Legislature grounds range from performances, celebrations, and festivals to rallies, flag raisings, and commemorative ceremonies. As a standard practice, organizations may book indoor or outdoor event space at the Alberta Legislature by completing a standard application form. All applicants must comply with established security protocols, public safety requirements, and venue guidelines." Geoff, when I've looked at some of the mainstream legacy media coverage of Sean Feucht's time in Canada and his tours and concerts, it's been very one-sided. And it makes me wonder whether the negative media attention the Canadian press has afforded him has contributed to Sean Feucht gaining more notoriety in this country and has actually caused some of the cancellations. Presumably, if he was just left alone to do his thing, I doubt there would be such a big deal.
Yeah, Cosmin, Sean Feucht's notoriety in Canada has definitely surged more significantly since the negative coverage, particularly with the Alberta event approval on August 22nd at the Legislative Assembly grounds. In Canada, outlets like CBC News and the Tyee have spotlighted his tour, framing it as a free speech debate, with cancellations in Eastern Canada and Alberta's approval generating national headlines. I mean, I had certainly never heard of him before all of the negative attention, and I assume a lot of people feel the same way. Feucht, a known MAGA-aligned Christian musician, has a steady but less amplified presence, with coverage largely confined to evangelical circles. For example, his social media has hundreds of thousands of followers, rather than broad mainstream attention. The Canadian controversy has thrust Feucht into a much higher profile, suggesting his tour has become a lightning rod for debates on religious expression in Canada. As some people say, any publicity is good publicity. A pro-Palestine protest group is planning on shutting down a portion of Toronto's subway system on Tuesday evening to demand an immediate arms embargo on Ottawa's shipments to Israel. Palestinian activist group East End Acts posted details last week of the planned Danforth takeover protest, which intends to disrupt all 8 TTC subway stops from Broadview to Main Street. East End Acts encourage protesters to, quote, "bring signs, pots, and pans between 5 and 7 p.m. Tuesday to capitalize on rush hour traffic." Toronto City Councillor James Pasternak called the plan a, quote, threat to critical city infrastructure, demanding authorities take all necessary measures to ensure public safety. He said, quote, I am calling on the Toronto Police Service and the Toronto Transit Commission to take all necessary measures to ensure public safety, maintain order, and protect people's rights to safe access to public transit across our city. The safety and security of all Torontonians is our priority, and we expect decisive action to mitigate this threat against public transit. Meanwhile, a TTC spokesperson said while traffic may be affected, subway stations will remain open and fully operational. The TTC said it has been in contact with protest organizers who confirmed rallies will not take place on their property. They said, quote, our special constables are in contact with Toronto Police and will be ready to respond accordingly to ensure that our service can continue without disruption. However, Pasternak believes the planned protest will violate the criminal code because it intends to obstruct the use of cities' infrastructure, making it unlawful to assemble for that purpose. He said, quote, it is not an activity that is protected by the Charter. So, Cosmin, has this been the most disruptive protest movement in Canada's recent times? Or where does it stack up compared to other protests?
Well, it's definitely up there, Geoff, in terms of the sheer scale and spread of these protests. They're happening in multiple cities, sometimes at the same time. And, whether it's Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, even here in Victoria, BC, every Saturday at 2 p.m., multiple streets, including Government Street, which is like a main causeway in downtown Victoria, are shut down for quite an extended period of time, and it's been happening for months. And just to imagine, I don't think this has even been reported on, but the sheer cost of all the police escorts that are involved in that, not to mention all of the time lost from or trying to head to work, people being delayed, it must be astronomical. And yet, when other groups want to have a protest, police and municipalities will even stick them with the bill for the security. But in this case, they're allowed to do it freely. And actually, it's taxpayers who have to pay these costs. So whether this actually is allowed to happen or goes on without a hitch, I think that it's partially the fault of the municipal politicians and the authorities who allow this to happen, because without their consent, without them greenlighting, the shutdown of possibly an entire subway line, it wouldn't happen. They have the tools and the measures and the ability to prevent a subway from being shut down, just simply based on safety reasons. That's all they have to cite. It is perfectly within the law to say, no, you can't shut down disrupt city infrastructure because of safety, let alone all of the financial, economic consequences of that. Conservative Party of BC leader John Rustad is calling on the NDP government to appeal a recent BC Supreme Court decision that would grant Aboriginal title to a vast swath of land in Richmond, jeopardizing private property rights. At a Monday afternoon press conference, Rustad said, quote, BC must appeal the Cowichan Tribes versus Canada decision to protect homeowners, farmers, and small business owners. Rustad equated Premier David Eby's, quote, immediate inaction to denying British Columbians that appeal, leaving families, municipalities, and businesses in a state of dangerous economic uncertainty. Rustad said, quote, Eby laid the groundwork for this mess years ago, and now he's refusing to clean it up. Private property rights are the foundation of our democracy. You cannot have reconciliation by stripping away rights from one group to give them to another, and you cannot have economic stability without certainty in land ownership, the opposition leader added. As previously reported by True North, the BC Supreme Court decision quietly delivered last Thursday granted Aboriginal title over major Richmond lands, including port facilities, municipal infrastructure, and private property. The ruling suggests Aboriginal title and fee simple title, private or public ownership, should, quote, coexist. A legal overlap, the BC Conservative Party says, quote, threatens investment, mortgages, and property security. BC Conservative MLA and Attorney General critic Steve Cooner said, quote, "This comes at the worst possible time, 16,000 jobs lost, record debt, collapsing investor confidence, and U.S. tariffs hammering our economy." So, Geoff, with this court ruling, the BC Supreme Court giving Aboriginal title potentially over these lands, do you think it sets a dangerous precedent that could perhaps undermine land ownership or, as Rustad points out, investor confidence, not only in British Columbia, but across the country?
Well, yeah, Cosmin, the BC Supreme Court's decision could definitely set a dangerous precedent for land ownership and investor confidence. The ruling suggestion that Aboriginal title and fee simple title should coexist introduces legal uncertainty, potentially clouding property rights, as BC Conservative Cooner highlights, with concerns about mortgage renewals and constituents fearing 99-year lease-like arrangements, a shift from traditional freehold ownership. This overlap could undermine investor confidence, especially given BC's economic challenges. 16,000 jobs lost, record debt, and U.S. tariffs incoming, making the timing particularly risky, as Cooner notes, potentially deterring investment and slowing the housing market amid high interest rates. The precedent may extend beyond BC, as similar Indigenous title claims, for example, the Haida Nation, and other Supreme Court rulings suggest a national trend where non-freehold arrangements under the Indian Act or First Nations Land Management Act complicate collateral and ownership, echoing concerns about economic instability. Critics like Scott McInnes warn of division between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, risking reconciliation if title disputes escalate, while the NDP's inaction on an appeal, as Rustad claims, could amplify these effects, leaving other provinces vulnerable to similar legal reinterpretations. However, proponents may argue this balances historical injustices through the lack of clear coexistent mechanisms beyond an 18-month negotiation period, fueling fears that private rights could be eroded, potentially impacting Canada-wide property security and economic predictability.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.